Welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I am Charlie Paparelli. And today we're going to be talking about business founders finding technical co-founders. This is a big problem, and it's going to be a growing problem as millennials move into their mid-30s, and more of these millennials have business experience and identify problems in the marketplace, but don't have the technical skills to build the product. So they need a technical co-founder. I've been an angel investor for the last 25 plus years. During that time, I've talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs about starting companies and growing companies, and I've learned so much from them. And that's what this show is really about. Entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs start companies and grow companies successfully. So if you'd like to not miss an episode here, you want to see every one, please sign up at paparelli.com. And I'd appreciate it if you get an episode sent to you, if you would share it with your other entrepreneur friends so that we continue to grow this community, because together we're actually stronger and more successful. Today I have two great guests. I have my son first, who is David Paparelli, who is the founder of mCultivo, and Michael Pink, who is the founder of SmartPM. They're in two different areas in that David is in his first year in this startup early on, and Michael has a couple of investment rounds behind him and is into his third full year with SmartPM. So welcome, guys. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So David, why don't you start off? First thing we need to do is just get an idea of what your company is about. So give us a quick overview on mCultivo, and then Mike, you just kind of pick up with SmartPM.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So mCultivo seeks to solve the problem of information imbalance in the coffee supply chain. So my background's in agricultural development, international trade, economic development, and primarily in developing countries. And we noticed that farmers just don't have great information to make business decisions about their farms on a daily basis. There's not enough, and it doesn't get there in a timely fashion. So we created a simple platform to get information like pricing information, technical assistance type information. The way we do that is we actually connect with their local processing facility. So we're offering sort of a lean ERP system into their into the processing facility. So they can then manage their operations efficiently, connect with their farmers, send the farmers the information they need, and be more in tune with the global market that is coffee.
And the problem that you identified in here is that you're trying to get farmers to increase the. Tell me again. Just why don't you summarize it instead of me trying to do it?
Sure. Yeah. So the problem we identified.
So how do you know you got to win at the end here?
Yeah. So part of the problem is just that farmers don't know where, when, and how much to sell their coffee for. They're a part of this global market that's globally competitive. Countries all over the world, millions and millions of pounds of coffee, and they're very focused on their local area and this the local issue that is their problem. They don't even realize they're a part of this global market. And so we're bringing them into the global market. We're making them more competitive. They can make decisions about where and when to sell their coffee, like I said, so potentially sell it for a higher price. That would be a good win. But it could also just be they diversify into other agricultural products because they can't be competitive in coffee. It could be that their farms are more efficient in general.
But overall, their income will go up.
Yes, that would be
really trying to get to, so they have a better quality of life.
Yeah, go up, be more consistent, have better cash flow, those kinds of things.
I got it.
Things that farmers face all over the world.
All right. Hey, Michael, tell us about SmartPM.
Sure, thank you. SmartPM's a construction data analytics platform that takes construction data and turns it into insights that decision makers involved in commercial construction projects can use to better manage their projects or better manage their risks on their projects. This is a problem that I dealt with as a consultant. People used to hire me to pretty much study their data for them, to explain what it all meant so that they didn't, become delayed or over budget. And usually they had me explain their data in a dispute situation because they were delayed and over budget. So there was data sets available. I understood how to read them, and we created a computer program to do it as well.
Yeah, I remember when you first started, you called it, what did you call it? The pink sheets?
Well, we called it the Pink Report,
The pink
which
report. There it is.
we just changed that like a week ago to the SmartPM Report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was getting too bashful on the calls, and they're like, "Oh, is that named after you?" I'm like, "Yeah, what do you think?"
Yeah, but the idea is that you actually were doing this stuff for, who were you working for, Deloitte at the time?
Yeah, I've worked for a lot of different companies. It's a pretty incestuous industry of construction consultants, but I was at Deloitte, KPMG, FTI Consulting, among others.
And they called you in because there was a dispute between the contractor and the owner?
Yeah, most of the time. I mean, sometimes they'd call us in to help them put up their processes and project controls on the front end, but usually, because of the nature of the way the industry is, people are very optimistic that this one won't be the same way as the last one, but they just continue to happen to go over budget and become delayed, and people fight over money all the time.
And you would come in, do an analysis, and
Yeah,
you would
I'd
be
have
the
to,
sort of guy with the data that says, you're right, you're
yeah.
wrong, this is who owes who kind of a deal?
Well, yeah, I mean, in summary, yeah, we'd be called in to basically study the data that they didn't know how to study, to explain what really happened on this job and how did it total into these overruns, and ultimately who caused problems along the way, to what level, and ultimately that would be brought through mediation, arbitration, and sometimes into litigation.
Yeah. I like what you said. I remember the first time that I heard you actually speak, you said, look, I've been doing this and it's been costing these guys an enormous amount of money to bring me in as a high-level consultant to do this analysis. I just said, why don't I just automate it and they can get it done for a tenth of the cost?
Right.
And I went, well, that makes total sense. Okay.
The data that we have available, that I always use, was available since day one, right? Yeah. So they just didn't have a process, nor did they have the expertise. If you understand your data in real time, you don't end up in that place. It's just the construction industry doesn't seem to understand that, proactive actually works, proactive risk management.
Yeah, so what you were doing, though, is you were creating a company around an already not only identified need, but something that people were spending money on.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
David, is that the case for you? Do you have a need that people are already spending money on?
Yeah, in some form or another, they are. Most of these farmers are working on Excel, which obviously costs them something, or pen and paper, but which is really staff intensive. And so they're spending money on employees to manage this mess of data and all the things that you would have to do in an operation. Farmers are spending money and time to find out this information. They're physically going to locations or kind of hearing rumors or gossip around what pricing is, or making phone calls, which costs minutes on phones. It's incredible in inefficiency, and there's a cost to that for sure.
But you're a little earlier on than Michael. Michael's already said, there it is. It's a problem. You're spending money on me as a consultant, $100 grand to bring me in. You can do it for 10. Okay. Well, that's a pretty good and easy ROI. You're a little early on saying you were spending time in a lot of different areas. So it's not a clearly identified problem they're spending time on where they have money. They know how much they're spending. So yours is a little bit harder to identify, I think, in the market. It's going to make it a little tougher on our sales side, than it is for Mike. Not that Mike just cruised in and started selling everything, but here's what happened. When I met Mike, he was starting to build product, but he was starting to build product. Okay. So, but where, Mike, are you? Let's establish this. Where are you in this process of finding the technical co-founder?
We have found our CTO, who's now been on board for a few years and actually has equity in the company now.
Okay. And about you, Dave, what about you? What's been your process here early on?
Yeah, so we had an early on interest from somebody who was a prospective co-founder, I'd call them, and they decided to kind of move on to go do other things and be more of a service partner to us. So we're early on in this journey of kind of retuning our technology strategy.
So you're kind of left a little bit flat-footed here. You thought you had it and you were on your way. And then now you're sitting here saying, you're actually in the midst of, I have to find a technical co-founder at this point.
Yeah, a technical co-founder or a CTO or a partner or some kind of outsourced strategy, something to keep things rolling. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Absolutely.
part of the problem is, when we get started, as both of you guys came up through your industries. All right. So you know your industry and you know the problem that you're actually solving within your industry. So you've got this deep knowledge, if you will. So when you talk to prospects, you're sort of peers in with regard to that. But that's not true. So of technical co-founders, these guys, they know how to build stuff, okay, that you envision. Right. So what did you run into, Mike, as you started down this path early on when you were sort of in David's shoes? So you had slideware, I'll call it, and you had a scratched out or maybe an Excel sheet on what this thing was going to kind of look like that was going to replace your manual work. What did you do next? How did you get started trying to find somebody? How did you start to, let's say, forget find somebody, but just start building the product?
I had to find somebody and not, and actually, let me back up for a second. I couldn't find somebody to help me build this product for many years. This idea was in my head since 2007. And, I worked through a couple different businesses and finally got to my place where I couldn't take the consulting thing anymore and not move off on my own and start working towards solving the problem. But I never really found anybody to help. I had asked around. I had asked anybody if they were interested in starting a business. I had, come back empty-handed many times because
when you do this, Mike, where do you go around? So this is why you were working as a consultant?
Yeah.
Okay. So where do you go around to ask? You said if I was asking people. Where do you go to ask people?
I mean, the first place that I could go is my network. I went to Georgia Tech, so I had a decent network of people that I started asking if they knew somebody who would be interested in a startup. And, I got some conversations going. Normally it was almost like, interviewing for dating. You had to see if they were the right fit, if they were interested, if they wanted to start a business with you. And I actually came back empty-handed for many years. I mean, I was in no hurry because I was fully employed. But eventually when I started my own business, I realized through that process that it's going to be hard to find a technical co-founder who's going to just stop what they're doing and work with me and then help me build this thing.
Did you learn that from the dry holes, from the earlier sort of interviews that you were doing?
Yeah, I pretty much realized, at least through my network, that it's hard to find a partner that doesn't know much about your business, but's willing to leave everything that they have to go do what you need them to do to build a business. So really what I learned is I'm not getting any person to work with me until I start paying them. And that was just from my vantage point. So what happened when I started
that makes you real as somebody who's looking for a CTO, if in effect.
Oh yeah.
You got to pay them.
Well, they look at it. I mean, you got to look at it from their angle. They don't know much about your business. They don't know if you're solving a real problem, and they've got this really good job where they're paid all this money and doing what they love, usually. So it's hard to just uproot yourself and go take a chance on a business idea that you don't know much about.
Well, if they're getting paid to do what they love, if they're getting paid and they are doing what they love, as you say, why would they ever join Michael Pink?
Well, you have to show them how what they're going to do with you, they're going to love even more and make more money.
How about, how about you, Dave? You're in a different position than him. You're just starting to talk to people. How did you get started in, when you had your potential technical guys sort of fall out? What was your first reaction, and then what did you do next?
Yeah, I think Mike's right. I mean, it's he said he's beginning the conversation sort of like a dating conversation. Well, the end of the conversation feels very much like a breakup, right? And so the whole thing is more personal and awkward than you'd probably like it to be for a professional kind of business conversation. But yeah, my reaction initially was to call people in my network. Call people who knew me, loved me, cared about me, and would potentially know other good people in the field. That might be a good match. It is challenging, obviously, to find somebody in a specific vertical that knows a lot about it, like coffee, that has technology experience, which is part of the reason why, these kinds of ideas exist. Mike's idea exists, or my idea exists, or why we might have a competitive advantage, because there's not, the construction industry probably isn't swimming in technology folk, and neither is the coffee industry. And so you have to kind of go outside of your initial professional network of people you worked with in the past. And I'm in the midst of that, building that new
How do you
technology
do that? That's
community.
really hard, David. I mean, to say I have to go outside of my network. I mean, that's a big move. Where do you go? If you gave me advice and say, okay, Charlie, go outside of your network to find somebody, I'm like, where do I start?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to go to
it's a big world out there, David.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody has an expansive network because of social media.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is.
Everybody's in our network now. Everybody's in our network.
Yeah, but you're dealing with David here. David's off of Facebook, okay?
Me too.
Yeah. I'd love to hear a story about someone who posted something on Facebook and found a technology co-founder as a result of that. I think that'd be a heck of a story. I mean, it'd be kind of like a dating app sort of story, right? I mean, you gotta, it's a different approach.
Business idea here, a dating app for technical founders.
There you go. Matchmaker, right?
Yeah, but the problem with that, Michael, is you'll be selling to people that don't have money.
Yeah.
Trying to get out of the ground.
Well, no, the technical founders would have to fund it because they got plenty of money. They have to pay to find us.
So the business founders don't have money. The technical founders do have money because they're so in demand.
Yeah, absolutely. That's ridiculous.
Interesting point.
It's a very difficult problem here in Atlanta right now.
Okay.
The bigger companies out there pay a premium for developers to just hold on to them. Pay like 1.5 times market rate to keep a developer quasi busy. So it's a hard thing to pull away from on an idea that they may not really know much about. They have to see. I mean, from my experience, we really, I paid multiple different people and they didn't all work out either. Like even paying them didn't work out.
This was people from the Georgia Tech network.
Well, there was Georgia Tech. Like the first one was from Georgia Tech network. He took the product to a place he couldn't take it any further, so we moved on. We were sort of scrambling, so we had to hire a outside company, like a development company, which is just 3 times the cost.
How'd you find them?
We just looked online. I mean, we were in the midst of a midstream deployment of our initial features and going to a show in 2 months, like a trade show, and needed to have it working. So we had to, scramble and pick up this new company. And then they just told us how bad the code was and just was like a drain of money to fix it. So that was my second.
That was the question. That was a big question that I had is whatever happens. So if I write whatever code I write, the next guy that picks it up always says it's junk. Okay. Always. Not sometimes. Always. Right. So this is the risk in this thing. So here I am. I have somebody that I paid to write it first, right? You take it to this group who then says, "Oh, I can't believe how much did you pay this guy?" Right?
That is the worst code I've ever seen.
Exactly right. So now you're back to how do you evaluate? Are they right, or are they just being professionally arrogant? You follow me?
That happened 3 times. The first guy
Three
did
times?
work. Yeah. The first guy wrote something. Actually, I didn't even tell you about the really first guy. There was a guy we paid $3,000 to from I don't know, Russia or something like that, and put something together. We had to get rid of him. But then I found the kid from tech. He worked for a few months. We picked up we lost him because he couldn't take it any further. We were scrambling. We hired a development company who told us that this is the worst code
How
they've
much
ever
did you
seen.
pay the kid from tech?
Oh yeah, man! I paid the first one about $100,000. I paid the next one about $100,000, and I paid the one after that about $100,000 before I found our CTO.
So you were down 300, and then you started working with the CTO. What happened when you worked with the company? You know, the big.
What happened when they were just terribly inefficient. It was like working with a consulting company. They had
Were they locals?
Yeah, they were right here in town, but
so
they
it wasn't
were
like the guys from Belarus or something like that.
No. We were paying premium rates for teams of people to save our product, and it cost a pretty penny, and it really hit me hard in the gut at the time. But I ended up finding another person. Like through that process, as we were continuing to build it, I wasn't not looking. I was finding. I knew that I wasn't going to be working with a development company forever. That I needed to find the right person, and I finally found a person who was a young kid who was deciding to move out of his, career job and start his own development business. He was deciding that I don't need to work for a company anymore. I'm good enough at coding that I can take on projects and to build a little business. And I just caught him right at the beginning of him doing that. And that's actually how I found my CTO. Same thing. This guy wasn't doing wasn't keeping up. And actually, he built his business, and he got too busy to help me anymore because I had the best vendor rate because I was his first client. But then he started selling more work and charging more money and getting more business. And then I got put on the back burner. But I happened to find the next guy the same way. I found a person who was deciding that they didn't need to be working for a business. They could make more money on their own, coding on their own. I mean, those are architect type thinkers. And I caught that person. That's Rohit. That's the guy that ended up being our CTO. I caught him.
So when you're out there and you're actually paying, so if you're paying real money, then you start getting a reputation as somebody who does pay, who is looking.
Well,
and that's where these people keep coming in the funnel.
No, I didn't. At this point, I was out of my network. I was looking, and I was, finding people through different ways. And but I had gotten to the point where I knew that to start this relationship with a person who doesn't know me, I've got to show them that I'm serious by paying them. But
how long did it take you from that first guy that you didn't even want to talk about, to when you got to Rohit, who is the guy that's now your CTO and partner?
3 years.
3 years. Okay, David. So where are you in this? What are you finding early on in this process that Mike was in? Remind Mike of where he used to be.
Yeah, some similar things. I would add something, maybe a twist on what he's saying. If good technology people are probably employed, they're in high demand, right? So you are trying to convince people to leave jobs, or what I am finding is what Mike said, which is they might be putting in only 10 to 20 hours a week in their current job. Their current employer is trying to keep them busy and keep them on staff, paying them a good salary. Maybe that is 1.5x market. But they have this extra kind of 10, 20 hours that they're willing to put into side projects. So a lot of them are doing kind of side hustle type opportunities, building apps on the side, doing things like that.
Are they charging full market rates for the side hustle stuff?
Sometimes it depends on what they're working on, who they are, but sometimes it's for equity. It's
how much they know about the market.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
So Mike, what did you say?
I said they might not know what they can charge at that time because they're
Oh,
just
I
getting
see.
their
Okay.
feedback.
They don't know what market rates are.
Right.
Right. I got you. Okay. Go ahead,
That's
Dave.
where you want to catch them.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So yeah, I mean, I'm seeing equity deals. I'm seeing people get paid full market rate, hourly rates, whatever it looks like. It's all over the place. But my challenge has been is can you convince that person to put 10 to 20 hours a week into your venture, fall in love with it potentially, and then come on board? Is that, and that's sort of what I'm finding and working through, instead of what you were saying, Mike, which, would be the dream scenario, which probably isn't a reality, which is someone to jump off the cliff with you, right? I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to go all in. I'm going to, 100% of my work is going to go into making this venture a success. And that's really not realistic, I don't
Yeah,
think.
one of the things that I think that hit me when I was thinking about this is that as business people, all right, who have been in that marketplace for, 8 to 10 years, all right, before you got started with your own business, you were lovers of the market, right? I mean, you knew those people, you understand those people, you know how they live, you know how they think, all that. David, you've been down to the farms in Nicaragua and Costa Rica. You've been out in Uganda. You've been around in these places. So you know the people. You've interviewed them. You've sat with them. You've had meals with them. And the same thing with you, Mike. You've been out with those contractors and those owners. You get them. You get them.
Mhm.
So now I say, all right, that's what I have. I love this market. And when you look at a technical guy, he loves product. I look at Bill Gates, and I never thought for a moment that Bill Gates cared about me. Bill Gates cared about Windows, way
Mhm.
back when. He cared about, the office suite, if you will. He was all about product. They was a tech guy. That's what they care about. They don't care about their customers, if you will. And so you guys, on the other hand, are business guys. You care about your markets. How do you then go find somebody that is a product person to say, hey, you need to kind of love what I'm doing here? How do you, that seems to be one of the bigger issues that you have to deal with right up front.
Well, I think of it, I mean, if I'm going in retrospect and I look at my journey as a litmus test of anything, I look at it almost as like you have to get them to the same place you'd get an investor. They have to understand that you know what you're talking about. You understand your business. You have a good direction. You know you're going to know how to sell it. You're going to know how to grow a business. I mean, they have to get that far along with you. A lot of them, because a lot of them are very smart, right?
Yeah.
They're not risk takers, really. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that as a blanket statement, but at least in my experience, it's hard to find a risk-taking developer. Somebody who would jump off that cliff. It's nearly impossible. But yeah, they have to.
So what happens? What that says to me? I remember once when I was giving a talk in Uganda to. I actually went to a guy who grew up poor in New York City, who did well after that. He went to Cornell on a scholarship, and he started doing really well. And I said, so, help me speak to these this poor of Ugandans to be entrepreneurs. He goes, well, it's very easy for a poor person to be an entrepreneur. And I said, why? He says, because they have nothing to lose.
Right.
So what you're saying is these people, these technical guys, they have a lot to lose.
Well, actually, there's a point there that is true. In the moment, short-term thinking, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what the hard thing to get over is to convince them that they're in such high demand. If this doesn't work out, you're gonna get your job back. You're like that, and you don't seem to understand that. It's literally they're thinking about their current happiness at that moment. Like, I think, and a lot of them.
So, Dave, you went through a situation here just recently, right, where you were trying to get somebody who wrote some of your product to kind of buy into this vision that you have and your love for these farmers, if you will. What happened?
Yeah, I think the common thing you hear from asking this question around kind of the technology community is, well, what are you passionate about? What do you want to do? And the answer commonly is, well, I like to solve interesting problems with technology. And it's so broad and vague. I mean, that could be anything. And I don't think certainly they're not lying about that. But if you're going to go commit to a startup and put 100% into it in this roller coaster ride, it's going to take more than I like to solve interesting problems. And I also found that it's incredibly helpful.
What do you mean by that? I don't understand when you say it's going to take more than that. What's going to take more than that?
The passion I think it takes to endure the ups and downs of doing this, the instability of a startup. There's going to be times where I want to quit as the founder, and they might have to convince me, no, we should really keep going. You shouldn't quit. And if it's just an interesting problem to them, and I say I want to quit, and I completely own the vision, I am the passion, then they might say, well, that's okay. I want to go solve a different interesting problem anyway.
Well, tell me this.
This problem's not being interesting.
Yeah, but look at what we're doing here. As entrepreneurs, one of the first things I always say, the first thing that I really think we need to do is we need to say, what's the problem we're trying to solve, right? So what you have here is trying to find, you brought up something really important, is these potential technology co-founders, if you will, or CTOs, even if they're not co-founders, because they come in a little bit later. The problem they're trying to solve, that you need to solve for them, is provide for them what appears to be an interesting technology, an interesting problem to solve with technology.
Yes.
That's the first step. Then there's this bridge that has to be built that actually comes to, let's move from it's an interesting technology problem to let's change the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So how do you solve the first one first when you're talking to these guys? And Mike, you did this. So you're talking to them and you had to present this as, hey, isn't this a cool problem that you would like to program, right?
Well,
how do you bring it over to so that's the first one. How do you present it? Because that's where Dave is. How do you present it so that's that you at least get their attention?
Well, I always came with money. I mean, seriously, it's hard. I mean, I had many people.
I've got a lot of interesting problems to solve. Who's going to pay me to?
Yeah, I hear money. But honestly, there was many conversations that I did have with people when I was actually trying to when I was naive enough to think at the time that I'd actually find somebody who would, go out on a limb with me, who didn't know me, and actually go start a business with this person in a business they knew nothing about. I couldn't do it. I mean, I literally couldn't find a person that I actually felt good about and they felt good about me, and I would be willing to move forward. I would say the only way that would have ever happened is if I had a friend that I knew, that knew me, and we would have done it together. But I didn't have that friend, at least at the stage. When I started, I was in my late 30s. So, most of my friends were having kids. So they weren't thinking about, jumping ship and leaving their nice jobs and whatnot. So you've got to find for me, there's a courting period, right? And there needs to be something in it for them during that courting period. And for me, that was just money, even equity. I mean, I would offer like large sums of equity, nothing. But at the same time, I had a pretty complex problem that was a very complex product to build.
So you're talking to these guys out of the gate, and you said, I'm going to offer them a large percentage of equity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what were you? Like, what do you mean? Put some numbers around that so they understand.
I mean, at the time, I was willing to split it 50-50. If I found a technical founder who was going to build this thing while I continued to do my consulting and not have to worry about funding it, that to me was worth it. And I was willing to give half of the business to that person if I could find him, but I couldn't find him. I mean, literally, people were saying, like, listening, saying, yeah, I hear that, but I don't know anything about your business, nor do I know if it's going anywhere. And I've got this really good job right now. So really, for me, the only solution was I had to tap into some money, and I had to make sure that they, I bought enough time to prove to them that I had
This
a
is interesting. So, David, tell us a little bit about what your experience was with that first person.
Yeah,
vis-a-vis what Mike just talked about. Okay, it's just funny that he should bring that up.
Yeah, I think that you're right, Mike. If you can find that kind of diamond in the rough sort of situation, what I came to was, a lot of people put rules around this where it's 25 to 30% or something like that. That's what's fair. But the reality is that if it takes an extra 10% of equity to motivate someone, then go for it. I mean, if you're going to be in partnership with them long term, then you have to go for it. But it is kind of that needle in a haystack situation of, well, where do you find that person? Who is that? And I think when you're working with new people, it is that courting period where you have to get them in maybe 10 to 20 hours a week, or whatever you can manage. See if you connect, see if you can work together well. And I'm in the very beginning of that. I'm not sure quite what that looks like completely, and how that's going to play out. My hope is that I find somebody that's putting in that time and says, you know what, I really like this. This is really compelling. I really like working with you. I think we're solving a real problem. Listen, I've had a chance to listen to your customers, listen to the market, and understand that we're solving real problems and changing the world. And I want to go all in on that. What is that going to look like? And then that becomes a different kind of negotiation with, well, what does it take for them to live? How much equity do they want? What's the upside versus them leaving their job, which is really challenging when people have kids and families and real problems, right? I mean, this isn't, this isn't a 22-year-old coming out of college
David,
necessarily.
Why would you say that you were dealing with somebody on the technical side that you knew? Okay, this goes back to what Mike said. Maybe if it was somebody in my network that I already knew and we were going to be partners, that would have been great. And you had that. It seemed like it was going to work, and then at the end, it was, no, I don't want to do that. What made the thing not work, which put you in this position of now I'm where Mike was 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's a good question to unpack. I think
entrepreneurs want to know, what can I expect? I mean, what?
Right. Well, and this was at the kind of, in my mind, this was sort of at the 11th hour, right? I mean, we were about to we had negotiated all deal terms and we were about to sign an agreement. We just needed it drafted. We'd gone through, I knew him, and we'd gone through kind of this 2 to 3 month courting period where we were intentional about, figuring out if this would be a good partnership. So I think why it didn't work is there was too much upside potential for going and doing other things. He had opportunities outside of this venture where he could be his own boss, and he could go solve other interesting problems. And that the market he's solving interesting problems for pays a lot more money than the coffee vertical, which is unsurprising. So I think that was a big part of it, and I think ultimately, which was great to know at the time, is you do have to have some alignment around the customers you're working with. If you're completely disconnected from that, there's always going to be a better opportunity. There's always going to be
because David, then you're back to that. I'm looking if the opportunity is to solve a more interesting problem, right? With technology, there's always a more interesting problem to solve with technology, right? So it really has to. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. You have to build this bridge from that, which is how you connect with them, because that's their need. Okay, to bring them from moving from product really to market. They have to fall in love with that market, okay? Just like you did, which means they have to fall in love with you first, I would think.
Yeah, I think you do need to. There's a kind of a conversion there, or kind of like this advantage. evangelical approach to the business, right?
Yeah.
I do think that, and I do now probably better understand, and I'll learn more as we go along. But problems stop being interesting as soon as things start getting hard. It's an interesting problem maybe from the elevator pitch or the pitch deck you give to investors, and it's an interesting problem to invest in. If you're talking in those terms, but as soon as you stop having clarity around your pathway to revenue, or you realize that it's going to take you 18 months or 7 years to build something of any kind of significance, that's not as interesting as a problem, because I can't code my way out of that, right? That's going to take some real effort.
No, that makes a total amount of sense. I like what you said, that that there was near term, there was a lot more money, and then I could be my own boss, kind of a deal. But what you're saying, David, what I hear you doing though, when I see you going, just to give a little background, Mike, I wanted to do this too, and this is also for the audience, is how far David came along with this guy. Okay, David went to the London School of Economics, last year. And it was his specialty. Why don't you tell that story and then finish with the competition, Dave?
Yeah, sure. So my background, as I said, it was about a decade in international development. And I went with a focus in coffee, really. And I went into the London School of Economics with a focus in social entrepreneurship. That was the focus of study. There was a master's in that, and part of that was building a social enterprise, a social business. And so, I went in with an idea, and I wanted time to incubate that idea. And what I found was my initial assumptions and ideas were horrible and completely wrong. So I ended up going through a really intensive interview process with people in my own network in the coffee vertical, from farmers, coffee processing facilities, exporters, importers, roasters, all over the place. In total, it was about 75 interviews to really figure out what are the problems.
These are people all over the world.
These are people all over the world: East Africa, Central America, South America, UK, US, folks even in the Middle East, like folks that are tangential to the industry, traders, brokers, things like that. So really trying to discover, after having 10 years experience in the industry, what are the real problems? What is the real issue here? And it seemed like the broad brush issue was everything is incredibly inefficient because no one has access to information that should be readily accessible. I think, Mike, it's what you were saying. It's like the data exists. All of this information exists. It's just, how do I reapply that in a way that helps me grow a business, helps me be more efficient, helps me take care of my farm, my family? And so I went through that process. We had a pretty, I would say after that, a fairly good understanding of the market and a fairly good understanding of at least the initial need. Now, whether we could generate revenue by supplying that need, that was a different question. We had to test that model. So, I got linked up to the prospective co-founder that recently exited, and he had a base. He had a code base that worked well for what we were trying to solve, and he was, we loved each other and we'd worked with each other in the past. So we kind of did this handshake agreement where we would build this kind of pilot, call it a more sophisticated MVP, because we were an MVP with a head start, sort of thing. So did you have a question, Dad? Do you want me to keep going?
No. I think the thing is to kind of then, so you start building this thing, and then it actually get to a point where you go back to the London School of Economics had actually a competition.
Yeah.
First of all, I thought it was interesting, Mike, that he actually, for one of his presentations he had to do was to show his business, and everybody else that he's in school with, of course, is doing slideware, and Dave actually shows a product. Guess who won?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we went through two different, I guess, Shark Tank type pitches. One was a full blown kind of competition for an accelerator that we eventually joined. And the other was just a part of wrapping up kind of this thesis for this master's program. Both went incredibly well. What we found is that most people resonated obviously with, we had already built something. We were in a pilot phase. We were testing something. We had experience in the area, so it was viable. But it was kind of this. It was these I'll call them non-sexy solutions, obvious solutions to obvious problems that we were trying to go solve. And it was a simple idea. We're just going to send out SMS texts and WhatsApp messages with real-time market information and updates that'll change people's behavior and allow them to build a better business. It really was technology that was probably 20, 30-year-old technology that we were building and still building and just applying in a niche new way. And I think that those ideas can be some of the best ideas. And the competition we joined had 100 other businesses compete, and we were the top award. And so this very simple,
but it was you
idea,
and this potential technology co-founder.
Right.
So you get to the point where you've been through all this and you win this competition in London, which gets you a entrepreneur visa to London, which would get you, how many £1,000 did you win on that deal?
Yeah, it was a small investment, about $15,000 out of the competition, but it was a grant. So no equity, nothing attached to it, which is the best kind of money.
Right. So even with all that, he left.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
See, that's a lot different than where Mike was, where he said, I didn't even tell you about the first guy. Okay. This is a big story. And I think that, you would think that you got the thing nailed, yet you didn't.
Yeah, no, we did not. It wasn't, and this is what I'm saying. This is kind of what we were talking about before. It's interesting problems don't keep people engaged. You have to convert them into something deeper. And honestly, interesting problems don't build quality products. You, especially in a startup vein where you're trying to be competitive with companies that are much larger than you, they have to be deeply connected to the market in order for them to understand what they're building and iterate on it. I think that my dream scenario would be someone who's a technical co-founder or CTO that's spending 50 to 60% of his time not developing but understanding the market in customer conversation.
Well, let's
iterating in that way.
Let's go from where you are, Dave, and jump ahead to where Michael is. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you found Rohit, okay, who's your CTO, that's about the time that I came into your life.
I had found Rohit about a year before that, actually.
Oh, you did? So tell us about those early days, that year with Rohit, okay? Because you had been through three other people before Rohit.
This is right? Three different, we'll call them development people / companies.
So here's Rohit, and he's sitting there with now at the beginings of his own company. Kind of talk about where he was and what was driving him, and how this thing sort of started to unfold, if you will.
Yeah, so I found him on a random site that probably doesn't even exist anymore, called White Truffle. I guess it was a free site for developers to find jobs at the time, and this was several years ago. And I don't think that company's still around, but me and him connected. And as a matter of fact, one of the reason I was so serious about Rohit was because I found this guy. The other guy who was working with me at the time was now working out of our office trying to run his business. I hooked him up with a place to work. He gave me a good deal. But then I hooked him up so much that he grew a business around me and couldn't help me anymore. So I was looking, and I found this person randomly on some site that I just looked up on Google. And he just happened to be this guy from Georgia Tech that, was, named Rohit and worked at Accenture, and he had a decent background. But what really got me was when I brought up his name to the guy that was already working with me, who was from Georgia Tech. He told me that kid he knew about that kid, and he knew that kid was smart. So I was like,
it's interesting. If you would have told me this story and said, look, I'm going to find somebody that's outside even my second ring network. Okay. I would have said, there ain't no way that's going to happen. And here you are, a random search on Google, random site, you find the right guy.
No, I found that he had this thing, like he was like the guy that I talked to who was working with me said that he's the smartest kid I've ever met at Georgia Tech.
Okay.
So I was
That's
like,
big.
okay, I'm going to not leave this kid alone now. I had him locked into my sights at that point, but I had to work on him. You had met Rohit. So anyway, I communicated with him, and he said he was going to start a little business, his new business with his brother, and he was done being in the corporate world. And I said, okay, well, I want to be your first client. That's how I met Matt before, but I got a really good deal on Matt because I was his first client. So I did the same thing. I said, I want to be your first client. And he's like, okay. I was like, what's your rate? He didn't know that he could get it. I got like a $90 an hour rate or something. Something really good.
That's really good.
Anyway, he started working with us, and first thing he told me when he looked at our code was, this is the worst code I've ever seen. So anyway,
and you said, what a surprise.
But, I could just tell with Rohit that he knew what he was doing. Like, he was good. He was better than the rest that had ever been around. Like, you could just tell. He was just good. So, I worked with him and,
what was your pitch to him? I'm trying to bring this back to where David is and where some other entrepreneurs is. So what's the pitch to the right guy?
At what point? Like when we first hired him or when I wanted to hire?
When you first hired him. I mean, you had to get him engaged.
Well, I think it was one of his first opportunities. I think it was more about timing.
Right time. Okay.
He didn't care about my business at the time. He just cared that he was starting his.
That makes a lot of sense.
So he had a client, and I told him that. I did say, I was like, I want to be your client. I want to be your first client.
Okay, good.
I want you to go start your business. I think you'll do great. And,
Now move it along from there then, Mike.
What's that?
So then move it along from there. So you get him engaged. He's finally got a client. He's making money. He's working on a real problem, right?
Right. He starts watching us progress. So he starts seeing our business, our way in which we work, right? And this was a difficult time. This was back, and David, just for you to know, this is about the time where I had to go back to the drawing board and do what you did with talking to all your customers. I had to go. I mean, I worked in the industry for 15 years. I thought I knew the customer, but I look at it now and I said, I didn't actually really know. I had to spend a good 6 months going through an iteration of a pivot with Rohit helping, and my brother's my business partner. So both he and I were on one last pivot, or else it was over. So we joined an accelerator as well at Georgia Tech called Flashpoint, which pretty much forced you to do hundreds of, they call them DPIs, documented personal interactions with people in your industry. Did the same thing. And then I realized, what we didn't know or what we didn't see at the time and what we needed to do about it. And Rohit, we still had some money left and Rohit was on board. But what Rohit saw in that, he saw a business growing. I mean, if you were to ask him, I would imagine that his response would be, and I've never asked him, like, what made you choose to work with us? But if I were to guess, it would be that he saw progress and he saw the problem now, and he interfaced with, enough of the business, the customers, or at least saw me interfacing with enough to put a plan together that made sense. And he also saw investors getting interested. So that was the time where Rohit pulled the trigger and said, I said, I want you to be an employee here, and I want you to own equity here. And that's what I want. And
what did he say? What did he say when you first said that to him?
I think he was working with his brother. Him and his brother started a development company. So what he would have had to do that would be to give up on his brother and his company to work here. But, I think it aligned with what he wanted. He wanted to be a part of a business that grew a product from nothing and
when did you discover that, Mike?
In the market. But he also, one more thing, he is not looking to just be a developer. He's looking to be a CEO. So that was his thing.
When did
So
you
what I
discover
told
that? When
Rohit,
did you discover that? See, when you first talked to him, he wanted to be a developer and he was going to build his own little development business, right?
yeah, well, he
When
wanted
did
to
you
have a
finally get
business.
to heart of hearts? This is what my vision, personal vision is.
Through the time, I just found he had an interest in business, but actually you're jotting my memory a little bit. That was one of his requirements. He wanted to be involved in the business. He wanted to be, involved in the meetings, in the leadership meetings. He wanted to have a important role. He wanted to learn marketing. He wanted to learn sales. He
That
wanted
is
to.
so interesting. I think that's part of the profile is what you're hitting on that makes it really work. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you're always fighting the original issue that attracted the guy, which is an interesting problem, right?
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that Rohit he did flat out say when we talked about this, he's like, I want to be involved in the business and I want to learn marketing. So he stays involved in a lot of the things, and I help him with. He helps me with financial models. He helps us with marketing strategy. He gets involved in what we're doing with systematizing our CRMs and our email marketing and scoring and
That's
then
really
studying
cool.
data. So he comes from an entrepreneurial family. His father had many businesses, and he was working at them and helping his father from a young age, doing coding. I mean, even in his young teens. So anyway, he's been around business his whole life. So I
Yeah,
think
but the
that.
fact that, but if I'm talking to a technology guy and I'm looking to bring him into a business, okay, if he just has an interest in being the technology guy, that ain't going to work. You're never going
Not
to
for
be able to
long, I
track
don't
the
think.
guy. He's always going to leave, right?
Well, yeah, they have to get something out of it,
Yeah, but
like
it has to
something
be something
big.
that you offer that they can't get themselves. Like you're saying,
Right,
you'll be part of
right.
this management team. You're going to really learn how businesses are built from the ground up. And eventually, this is going to, when you're into your late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, you're CEO level material.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that at least in with Rohit, that was a big deal, and that was probably what made things work so well.
David, when you're talking to somebody like right now, do they have this kind of a profile about them? Or are they more sort of functional area kind of expertise and just want to stay in that functional area?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're far enough along in our relationship to say
Right.
someone to say, what I really want out of life is to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I mean, and if someone did say that, I probably wouldn't take them seriously because, I'd say, well, the way to get there is not to start a fledgling startup. You might want to go get C-level experience somewhere. But no, I haven't heard that. That would be. I think maybe on these early on conversations, it's more of a gauging, like a dating relationship. How interested they are about the business? How are the questions they ask? Good questions. That kind of thing you can suss out. Whereas the lifelong ambition sort of stuff might have to wait until the second or third date sort of thing.
They
Yeah, but
need
I do
well,
think
I'll
that
tell
it's
you
important. Go ahead, Mike.
one thing that an indicator is a hint of entrepreneurialism, right? Like each one of the ones that the other guy Matt. I mean, Rohit, I'm really happy with, but the guy Matt before him, I've as we've gotten really busy, I continue to bring his name up with Rohit because he was an entrepreneur type. Like he separated himself from the business world and started his thing. And Rohit still didn't like his code that much that he will not hire him. But nonetheless, I go back to that little piece like people who are interested in business and wanting sort of. I mean, you're that, David. You're an entrepreneur. You can smell your own. They're just, not stuck to the corporate world, and they have these visions that are beyond that. So that's where I was kind of looking was do they have a risk portfolio, a risk threshold like mine? Do they like business like I do? Do they have are they idea people, right? Idea people are entrepreneurs, right? So
How did you know when you had the right guy?
with Rohit,
Yeah, when you knew.
very
It's one
I
thing
mean,
that you said, oh, he's the smartest guy at Georgia Tech, so he has the potential to be the right guy. I mean, that's right. That's pretty good evidence, but there's more to it than that.
Yeah,
for
there
him to
is.
be the
I think,
right guy. So how did you
well,
know when you said, yes, this is really clicking now? What happened? What did you
it
see?
was, I mean, I just saw that well, the one thing that really worked with me and Rohit more so than any of them was that me and him could connect mathematically. Um, like when our brains, like we can speak to each other in ways that people in the room around us would be like, what the heck are they talking about? Like we could connect at that level, function, like mathematically, like that's most of what our product is mathematical analysis, and
Yeah.
being able to connect at that analytical level was huge. And then, yeah, just the quality, like the quickness, like I could tell when he would do stuff that I was like, this is like 10 times faster than other people that I've worked with. Like you go through that process of working with developers and you can sort of start to estimate out how long things should take. His was like extremely quick. Like he'd be like, I'm done. I'd be like, you're supposed to take a week, He'd be like, no, I figured out a different way. Those kinds of little things adding up. I was like, I can't let this guy go. So.
Now, let me lead the witness a little bit here, too, is how about making that transition from what I'll call love of product to love of market and mission? Did
Well,
you
Rohit,
see him make that transition?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Rohit's just a learner type. He wants to learn any possible thing he can possibly learn, and he enjoys doing it. But it's interesting that you bring that up because Rohit's actually right now, taking on a bigger role. Like we're moving him. We found a new architect. We hired this new architect. Rohit's evolving from, obviously the lead architect / CTO. He's the CTO, and he's actually interested in taking ownership, or at least being heavily involved in customer success and doing what I've been spending a lot of my time on, talking to the customer, hearing what they have to say. And as a matter of fact, to David's point, I couldn't ask for a better place for him to be, because now he hears from the horse's mouth. He doesn't hear from me, in my opinion. He hears from the customer themselves and solves the problem. Like it's not me saying, hey, I talked to these guys, this is what they say, so here's what we need to do. It's, Rohit, what'd you figure out? Right?
Yeah.
And he hears it, and he knows the product. He's learning, and he's inherently learned the customer. But I'm really excited about the amount of time and energy he's going to spend with them, and he's going to learn them more than ever now.
So this is interesting. So instead of saying falling in love with the market, is you move from loving the product to having an appreciation and interaction with the customer.
I think that he sees that there's a big, I don't know, actually, possibly, but if I were to guess, and I'd have to ask him, I feel like Rohit is more interested in solving the problem and understands that the customers are the best information he can get.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dave, what are your observations from what Mike has been saying, on how do you think that this is going to help you on this path?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit stingy on bringing people along, and I could invest more in that. I'd be curious on Rohit or anybody else that you worked with on if you were paying for their time while they were talking to your customers at Flashpoint, or in that way. I mean, because I do
You
think
broke
that
up
is
there a
more.
second, Dave. Could you repeat that? Something
Yeah,
in that
sorry.
way. We missed it.
Yeah, I'd be curious on how much you invested in Rohit early on in the process to bring him along in these DPIs, the customer interviews. Was he involved in those, or were you just communicating back, hey, this is what customers are saying, this is what investors are saying?
So here's what happened at that point. He saw money coming in. So Flashpoint, the goal at Flashpoint is to have enough conversations that you can pivot your idea into something that somebody's willing to write you a check for in like your first meeting. And we got there. Like we figured out what we weren't seeing at the time, and it wasn't just about the product; it was about the people we were selling to. But he saw movement in the revenue department happen pretty quick. And he then saw interest coming from investors happening alongside that. So he knew that he was getting involved in a startup, I think, that was starting to get liftoff, and he knew that it solved the real problem. He knew I did that consulting. He knew how much money I made doing that consulting. He watched me do that work manually while he built the product. So he got to understanding that a little bit. But yeah, I think that it was he's a smart guy. He saw the business. He saw it moving. He knew what he wanted personally. And he saw this potentially as an opportunity to really be a part of a business that grew from the ground up. And that's the experience he wanted. So to me, I mean, if you stand back and really look at it, it's needle in a haystack. Don't give up. You got to keep looking, keep looking. You got to keep moving forward. The route I took was I have to keep moving forward, but I'm not ready to get married yet. So I'm just going to have to, pay for this person. That's a horrible analogy. I wasn't paying for a contract. Right. But anyway, I said, I can't commit to anything right now, but I don't want to lose steam. But when you find the right person, you don't let them go. Right.
Yeah. Do you feel that? Yeah, go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
It also sounds like there's a big difference between pre-revenue and post-revenue, right? I mean, there's this, if you've proven out your revenue model, people are writing you checks, then, you're more likely to get people that are talented to be interested in what you're doing because they see momentum. And money is momentum, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly, like I said, it's like the mentality of the investor. They have to see positive progress. They have to be with you long enough to see the progress, right? They have to watch progress over time. And that's something I learned about, raising money. I mean, this is the first time I've ever raised money. But what I realized now that I didn't know 2 years ago was that while I'm getting frustrated that they're not giving me an answer, I'm realizing now that they're just learning who I am and what my business is doing. And they're watching me progress, and they have to be able to quantify progress in a finite period of time to decide if they're willing to work with you. And I think that the mentality of the technical founder was the same.
Hmm. Wow. So what do you pay these guys at different stages? So when we talked about you get into a situation where you say, I'm just getting started. I'm still working as a consultant. I want to build this product on the side. You said, oh, yeah, well, that'd be like a 50-50 deal, all right? But then you get to a point where I have gone along. I've paid all this money. I have built something. I do have a customer who, at least one, who's paying me something, right? I've been through Flashpoint. I've got investors who are interested in putting money in. That's a different stage. I mean, that's pillar to post, right? On what you're going to pay somebody to come in. What's the range? What does the range feel like for you, Dave? And what's the range that you would recommend to entrepreneurs? Mike, depending upon the stage you're at. You follow me? Mm-hmm. We established the early stage, which is I don't have enough. I have slideware, right? Mm-hmm. An idea, and we established that. What happens in later stages? How does it change that pay package? Because it's equity and
well, the equity goes down and the price goes up, or as they sort of level off at some point. Early stage, the equity is high and the price is low, if not hopefully free. Short of equity, you're paying market rate per hour. That's just it. And then as you get them more involved, there's always, in my opinion, you're always going to pay market rate. You're always if you're going to pay money, you're going to pay close to market rate. And if you're not paying close to market rate, you're paying the rest with equity. And that's the upside to an entrepreneurial founder.
Do you do equity do you just drop equity on the deal, or do you kind of have them earn into it, if you will?
Well, we did a vesting schedule with options. We gave them a sizable amount of options. I would say that Rohit is probably the fourth largest shareholder here.
How long is the option
outside,
period? What's the exercise period on that makes it all work?
well, in retrospect, it would have been nice to do 4 years, but we did 3.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think that 3 is aggressive because you can't. Now, in retrospect, you don't get that far in your first 3 years. It's going to take a little bit longer, and
That makes sense.
I think that Rohit, he is taking a big hit salary wise, where what he could be making, but he's happy with the equity that he's getting because he sees
Got
that
it.
at the end of the day, if we hit what we think we can, he'll make more money here than he would have anywhere else other than starting.
What are you hearing? Thanks, Mike. So what are you hearing, Dave, as far as what advice are you getting?
Yeah, I think the first conversation or the first good piece of advice I got was, why are you talking about a co-founder? That word is very loaded. And it comes with more of maybe like a 50-50 mindset, or even a 30-70 mindset. I mean, some enormous chunk of equity, and usually the technology person might think it's enormous chunk of equity and pay. They get both. And what you have to get into, and I'd be curious about your thoughts on this, Mike, is is it a co-founder? Is it a CTO? Is it a partner? How do you kind of frame this up, so that I guess expectations are in line? Because I found that saying the word co-founder immediately changes the conversation to an area where I might not want it to go.
At least from my experience, I would probably wait until the agreement was done before we came up with a title, but I would give him the title that he wanted. So negotiate the deal of
But what about
what's the
just the early?
finances
What about the
behind this.
discussion? You're not walking. What David's saying, you don't walk in and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a co-founder."
Oh, yeah, I don't recall. I hear what you say. Co-founder says 50% right off the bat. I mean, you're splitting it. So yeah, I think messaging wise, it's definitely something to be cognizant of. If I recall correctly, I mean, I think that Rohit and I never talked about title. We just talked about business and where we could take this business and what it would do to take it to that place and what that would mean. And then when he said, "Okay, I'm in," I said, "What do you want to be called?" So I think he preferred CTO, but that's also an important thing. I mean, title, having that on your resume.
So when you were mining your network to find the right person, or to find kind of the person to kind of man your technology vision and strategy, what did you ask your network? Did you ask, "Hey, I'm looking for a technology person, or a developer,
No,
or a dev shop"?
I actually was saying I'm looking for a good developer who understands the technology stack that we've already invested in. I mean, we were held up to that. I mean, that was a choice I didn't make early on. The guy who we hired the first time just started running with a technology stack that he knew. And then the next guy just picked up and ran with it. And then the next guy ran with it again. And, all the code was shoddy at that point. But I needed to find somebody that knew that technology first. So I was looking.
But the title that you actually looked for is, you said, "I'm looking for a tech developer."
I look for a lead developer. Is what
Lead
I was
developer, yeah.
Lead
That's
developer,
what I think David's asking. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. I mean, at that time, I was also thinking, and this actually came with, if I talked to somebody that called themselves a CTO, they were going to be too expensive. I needed to find somebody who wanted to be a CTO and thought they were ready to be a CTO, but was not called a CTO.
I love it. All right, so let's together come up with, as we sort of wind this down now, just come together as we're giving advice to these entrepreneurs that are out there. You two guys have come from two different sets of experience. David's much earlier than where you are, Mike. You sort of the right now happy ending in finding that technology person that partnered with you. What's the process that we can kind of come up together that says, okay, here's what you need to go through to find this person?
David, you want to start?
Since you're early in the process, Dave, you know.
I mean, I don't have a good answer. I think what I've gotten out of this conversation and the other conversations I've had is part of it is just get to work. You do have to mind your network. You do have to, ask the right questions, make sure you're aligned on vision and mission and values and those kinds of things that you would do during kind of a dating process or anything else. But I think a big part of it is just you have to get to work on a project, and if that costs you money to get to work on a project with somebody you think is a good maybe lead developer, that's where you're going to learn the most about each other. See if there's alignment, and hopefully you fall in love with the mission and each other and the company, and you start having these kind of synced up conversations that you're saying, Mike, that nobody else can understand but you two. But there's no way to have an initial conversation, I don't think, to suss that out in a really succinct way. It's just get to work, spend money on it, invest in it, and if the business works, it works, and it'll be worth your time in that person.
Yeah. Actually, as you were talking, it seemed to me like what it's all saying is you have a goal to find this person to partner up with, almost like a marriage, and you have to go through dating to get there. You're not just going to pick the person on the first time. You have to know that there's a process, and that each person is a process, and you have to be willing to take a chance on that process or that person when you first meet them, but know when to pull the ripcord if you have to, and keep moving, but never stop looking until you find that one. That's what it seems like. And yeah, I think that's in retrospect, to your point, is you can't lose steam, but you can't give up looking either. And even when you have somebody in your grasp, you should still be out there seeing if something else is better. Even though, in a non-invasive way, at least with our situation, we were paying them as contractors. So I wasn't, all in on any of them as I continued searching. And that worked for me. At the end of the day, we finally found on number 4 was the one that we actually, no, number 5. I forgot about old Igor. So number 5 was the one that we ended up with, but that took years.
Yeah, but I think that the risk involved in this is tremendous. I saw personally what Dave went through when we don't got it. And here I am. Now, what do I do? Now I've got these pilots that are out there. I'm not sure if my technology is really mine and it's stable. Okay. How do I get to this next stage? It's very high risk. But yet you too, Mike, even later stage, if Rohit wasn't the guy and you were still looking, can you imagine? Oh my God, it'd be incredible. I mean, you would be sitting there. Now you're great. Now you got even customers that have their ladders or use, I should say, they're using this technology that isn't really well done, So it's this hit and miss kind of thing. You can't grow that,
Yeah, I think that I guess at the end of the day, if I'm looking at it for what it is, that's part of the deal when you do this kind of stuff. You've got to know that there's a potential pitfall, and you got to sort of have a backup plan.
That's great, but the big pitfall in starting a technology company, as a businessman, okay, who knows his market, okay, and you two guys are in vertical markets, is I have to have a technology person that's functional and works well with me, right? That coordinates well with me and understands the customers and all that. That's what builds. That's the next step in real high value in your company. And it took you. I mean, we talked about this, Mike. It took you 3 years to get. It was you and your brother. So your brother's more of the operations and CFO kind of type. You are obviously the expert in this particular market, okay, and this analytics product. You got Rohit now as your CTO or technology lead and developer, and then you brought in a VP of sales, which took time, okay, to kind of get to where that worked. But getting to that executive team took at least 3 years for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's been people who we've had to let go, multiple people in each major role. And I feel like if I don't know if this is for everybody, but man, I feel like my first pick in every role was wrong, and you just learn from it and you figure out through your first trial, just like dating, what didn't I know about myself or our business before this, and what do I know now, and how do I go to the next person that I know I need?
So now you can take a little bit of an investor view and say you've seen the forecast that we put in place that you see from entrepreneurs. So here's a guy with slideware, and he's telling you in year 1 we're going to do $1 million, in year 2 we're going to do $4 million, in year 3 we're going to do $9 million. And as an investor, you look at that now with your experience and say, how are you going to find a VP of sales? How are you going to sell the first one, right? How are you going to, the questions get to be more on the ground, knowing what's ahead of people, you know, and what they have to achieve and how much risk. It's all fraught with risk, you know, to kind of bring it together.
Yeah, I get it. Trust me, looking back at what I didn't know a few years ago, clear as day now. And it's probably not all as clear as day because I got a few more years that I got to figure more stuff out. So, yeah, it is interesting what you know. What you don't know, you don't know.
That's the way it is, man. David, did you have one more question for Mike, or did you have one more comment, or should we close it out? It's up to you.
Yeah, I think I'm good. This has been incredibly helpful to talk through and be with you guys on this. It's a long road.
It is a long road, but I think that it does have a happy ending. It just doesn't feel that you got to enjoy your victories, as small as they are, as you kind of go along. But I think that first one is what Mike said, and I heard you pick up on that, which is market actually paying to solve the problem that you solve is actually something that people all look at, investors and good employees, potential employees alike, that say, oh, it is real. This is going to actually grow into something. So it's important. The other thing I pulled away from this from you guys is it really is about dating, Mike. It is dating to get to a marriage. All right. So it is this constant staying in each, so that's the first attraction, right? And then this relationship that you have to build by working together with more and more exposure to investors, to customers, to other employees that you bring on board, to each other, you know, and over time it turns into something where you say, you know, we're in this now. We're in it together and it's working. But there's no shortcut to it. There's no shortcut to it. I mean, that's what I've learned from this conversation. So, and I like what you said, Dave, which is, you know, here's what you do in the process. You start.
Exactly.
And Mike showed us that he started and he never stopped until here he is 3-4 years later. And it's like, okay, now it's up to Rohit, who I trust, to find the next guy.
Yeah.
That's going to be that, right? So it's not me anymore, it's him. And that's when you know you've kind of licked it. Okay, that's the executive team in place. So, man, I'm so excited for you guys. Thanks for doing this and taking so much time. You know, I know it's going to help a lot of entrepreneurs. I hope it did help you, Dave. And I hope it also helped you, Mike, in remembering what you did so that you might continue to help others who are going to come your way.
Absolutely. As always, going down memory lane always helps.
Yeah. Well, I love you guys. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to close this out now, and that'll be the end of the show. So thanks to David and Mike. They did a really good job. You know, thanks again for taking your time to listen to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I think this is a hot topic, you know, finding that lead developer who will turn into a partner for you in the future. I think we're going to see more and more of that as millennials who are moving into their early 30s and mid 30s begin starting companies, having worked for other companies and learned their vertical markets. So we're going to see some great new businesses start, and we're going to need to know how to find that partner if we're going to build a technology company. So thank you very much for attending, and please subscribe at paparelli.com. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.